Let's go.
Welcome to the Soul Fam Podcast, where we expand your personal universe. I'm Diana Marquetta, and in each episode, Soul Fam co-founder, co-creator Lexi Strummer-Solden and I interview the world's most rising and longtime experts in consciousness, spirituality, entertainment, healing, and science. From Earth's dimensions and dimensions way, way beyond. On the Soul Fam Podcast, our frequencies are high and your heart chakras will open as these powerful voices of today share cutting-edge research, profound experiences, and valuable knowledge for your world in this out-of-this-world, thought-provoking, envelope-pushing interviews that could only take place right here on the Soul Fam Podcast. Welcome to the Soul Fam Podcast. I'm Diana Marquetta, host of the Soul Fam Podcast. Today, we're super excited because Mark Marinaccio from The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch and a recent Discovery show, Alien Encounters. Mark is a premier producer of monster stories, alien stories, all this paranormal. He's done at least 20 shows. Would that be about right, Mark? Maybe more like 30. Has been working in the industry for a long time and is shifting not away from nonfiction, but really starting to do a lot of scripted work. So we're here today to talk about alien encounters that seem to be on the uptick in the United States or worldwide today, and to hear about Mark's most recent encounters with monsters and aliens and all things paranormal. So what are you working on right now, Mark?
Hey, Diana. Thanks for having me on. It's great to see you again. Yeah, I actually don't think I've ever counted the actual number of projects, shows, series, pilots, et cetera, that I've done in the genre, but it's been 25 years now of really primarily focusing on strange, unexplained, paranormal. So, the number's definitely up there as far as episodes, hours, and experience. So, yeah, it's been quite a bit of work. I say that sometimes not to be egotistical, but I can't think of anyone else. I may be the person with the most amount of professional hours into the unexplained one on the planet. Primarily what I've gotten paid to do my entire career.
What do you recall exactly what was your first tiptoe into this sort of genre?
Oh, yeah.
Which show was it?
Ghost Hunters.
Interesting.
OG. Yeah, original Ghost Hunters was season 3. That's where I got started in the paranormal.
And do you remember what the theme of that particular Ghost Hunters episode was? What that particular series was about?
Yeah, so I did, it's like 35 or so episodes of that series, and then I think maybe 25, and then I also did Ghost Hunters International. But the very first episode I did was when the team went to Ireland, and so I flew out. I got offered the job on like a Thursday, and on Tuesday, I think I was in the air on my way to Ireland to meet them. In Ireland, the first case that we did that they were working on was Lep Castle, which was a castle built in I want to say 100 AD by Druids.
Oh, cool.
So it was, I was thrown right into the fire in the most amazing environment, location, stories. That was my first one, and it was wild. I was out there, and we had done some other places all over Ireland, and a lot of the time it was just out in the middle of nowhere. It's a night show, so you're out in the middle of nowhere and pitch black, and there's sounds and whatnot coming from different directions, and you're in another country that's just rich in culture, history, with their ties and their belief in the supernatural. So I was always listening out for the scream of the banshee.
Was that one of the focuses of the show, to listen to the banshee?
No, it was not. But the story of the banshee is when you hear her scream, it means you're going to die. So God, I hope we don't hear the banshee.
So what was going on at Lep Castle at that time? Do you recall?
So it was this family, husband and wife and their daughter, who lived there. who, as is the case in most, I want to say, either European or cultures more deeply rooted in the supernatural and their belief, and they were not terrified. They were not struggling or, being haunted in a negative sense, but they recognized that there was something going on and had some moments, I think, of scariness and sort of a little different from the usual ghost hunters, which was, call for help. But they were experiencing everything you can think of, from apparitions and sounds and different types of activity. But what we got into when we got there, I mean, right away, one of the cast members, the investigators, was like pushed, like scratches showed up on his back. Yeah, there were, EVPs that were captured that were really demonic sounding and odd. And in fact, the owners were concerned when we left that we had, angered or disturbed a little bit, maybe too much what was there, which happens, right? But, it was really, I was really, like I said, thrust into the full gamut of the ghosts' experiences, from the noises, the sounds, the objects, the negativity, the feelings, physical, pain. There was video evidence, audio evidence. So it was like, cornucopia of paranormal activity and evidence at the location.
Was there a history there of any sort of imprisonment, or had there been, destruction, whether it was war or torture in that particular castle?
Yeah, I mean, the looking back, over time, of course, you're going back to, like I said, 100 AD. Different, especially in those types of locations back then. There was a lot of fighting. I believe on the wall at the castle, there was a plaque that said, "Me against my brother and I against our neighbor, all of us against the foreign invader." And that really was, when you think about it, it was like, you protect, you're at odds, sort of, you're in survival from everyone, including your family. And there was a dining hall on the top floor of the castle. And it's difficult, so long ago, to recall exactly the story, but it was something like the owner at the time had invited people over. I want to say it was like clergy or priests or something. Maybe it was like another family, kings. I don't recall exactly, but at the end of the room was like an opening in the floor. And they essentially, the owner, like, they attacked everyone that they invited over and tossed them into like this pit, which was, I think there were spikes on the floor, and basically murdered a bunch of people. It was very Red Wedding, like from Game of Thrones, if you know that episode. And it was just a horrific act. But this is what they did back then. So it was just, the impression left on the place.
Right.
I mean, look, the way that they built the castle was, the spiral staircase, stone steps going up to the upper floor. The steps were uneven heights, so that the owners and the people who lived there could memorize that. So when they're sword fighting going up and down the stairs, they know which steps are higher or lower, that the enemy doesn't, throws the enemy off, gives them an advantage. I mean, that's how survival and fight minded they were, was that even the way the house was constructed was to be able to fight and defend yourself in your own home.
That's fascinating. Very
weird and different way to live, right?
Yeah. And I think we're going through tough times now in LA. Wow, that's really interesting. So you've done so many different kinds of paranormal shows. I mean, every single one of them has fantastic stories coming out of them. And I don't know if the audience realizes how much the production crew goes through while you're actually filming these shows, and how much you really witness and experience yourselves.
Yeah, I'm a bit different from a lot of the way that I work has always been a bit different from what the standard unscripted or reality producer or docuseries producer is, because this was my interest going into it, and it never stopped being my interest. So, I became a part of the field and the community, even when I wasn't making shows, and I'm not making shows, but still where I'm engaged and interested. So I often took on the role of, somewhat of an investigator, but an investigator a little bit more purpose driven. But it's also why I had great relationships with everybody I worked with, because, I was interested and I was working with them to figure it out, get to the answers, find the truth, get the evidence, understand the mystery. It was interesting to me, and it was knowledgeable, and I had, always have great ideas and suggestions that don't interfere with investigations, but also lend themselves to be valuable, not so much to the TV production, but to the audience. Right? I would say, I'm a stand-in for the audience. I want to make sure that we're asking and answering the questions that the audience asks and wants to know. And we're doing the investigation in a way that is fulfilling the promise of a premise in a way to the audience. Like, we're going to not just do the same things over and over again, or overly draw out or enhance what's going on to make it just creepy and interesting. Let's do the work. Let's do the investigation. Let's really dig to get at something. And so that passion and enthusiasm and purpose is what made me successful, made me, gave me the opportunities to do everything that I've done in the field. So, but that's also knowing that me and the crew and the team, we're going to be subject to experiences as well. We're going to get to that. And, I was always the guy right alongside the lead investigators, but off camera. Me, a camera operator, and sometimes a sound guy close by. We're the ones going through the tunnels, castles, through the woods. So, yeah, we always have experiences. Very few people never had an experience. You'll hear people be like, skeptical crew members be like, I've never seen a ghost. I've been doing this, 20 years, never seen a ghost. They may have not seen a ghost, but you press them and you get to that. Yeah, well, this one thing happened. It was really weird. Or yeah, sure, that was weird, but I don't know what that was. I don't know. And then right down to crew members getting physically shut down or knocked down. Famous episode of Ghost Hunters where the audio guy's camera bag or audio bag came up and hit him in the face.
Wow.
And that's not including the sheer ridiculous amount of equipment failures.
Right. That's the other thing I was going to say. There's always electrical interference.
The redundancy you have to have, especially on Skinwalker Ranch. People, want to know, how come the cruise cameras don't go down? They do. We just have so many of them running just in case, because we know a camera is going to just shut off, on a reason, or sound's going to go out, or lights are going to go out. So it's redundancy. It's like you are so overly prepared so that when those things happen, we're still capturing from another. It's just numbers, it's math, right? It's like, well, we have to make sure we have more equipment operating than can possibly be affected by whatever's affecting it. So somebody will come out with a specialty camera or a piece of drone to a location, whether it's Skinwalker Ranch or anywhere else, and that drone won't work.
Right.
That's their only one piece of equipment in that moment. And so, of course, at the same time, we have equipment going down, but we also have that doesn't go down because of the redundancy. So we still can capture what's going on. But yeah, Skinwalker Ranch, that was a big, big part of it, and something that, the ranch owner, Brandon Fugel, always wanted to share more with the audience was just how often our equipment was affected.
Like, if we saw the behind the scenes of all that, would we see multiple cameras, multiple generators, multiple sort of things back up? Because you never know when something's going to break. And I can imagine if the drone is your only drone, well, that's frustrating.
Right. I mean, we on most of these shows, you're looking at a minimum 3 cameras with camera operators, plus, many fixed cameras, locked off cameras. And then like Skinwalker Ranch, on top of that, you've got the actual ranch cameras, the different setups that they have around the ranch that are running 24/7 capturing. And, there were times on the show, and this stuff made it into the show, but out in Skinwalker Ranch where, at one particular time at the end of season 3, which is the season that I produced, Travis Taylor saw something out of the corner of his eye, and he went to Eric Bard, who pulled up the cameras, and the camera facing that direction was suddenly pointed down. But thankfully, another camera that was running captured it, and you see for a split second, looks like a UAP or an object in the sky. So it's just that redundancy, those backup systems. So yeah, if you saw the behind the scenes of any paranormal show, there's a lot of a lot of that sort of thing taking place.
Since you spent a lot of time on Skinwalker Ranch, did you come up with some sort of final summation when you departed?
Yes and no. I've always been a strong believer that paranormal, if you want to use that word, which I just generally don't use.
Yeah, I agree.
It's got people believe it to mean one thing. Same thing, I don't use the word ghosts because what does that even mean? It means different things. But on Skinwalker Ranch, I think that like everywhere else, mostly what we're experiencing is something that there is a science for. There is a physics to understand. We just don't have it. And whether that's because it's happening on a quantum level, which means it's literally outside of our observable universe, so we don't have physics to understand, sort of look at it, dissect it, inspect it, investigate it. But also a lot of paranormal, unexplained, strange. You got to think of it like, if you're trying to, screw into a wall and all you've got is a belt sander tool, you're not going to be able to do it. Right. So I always think like we don't understand. It's like saying the easy ways, we don't understand what the tool is that we need to investigate what's going on. Because it's stimuli, right? There's something going on, and what do we have to capture or transmit or receive and interpret that? Right. If you didn't know what a radio was, but you had like a spectrum analyzer that could see that there's signals flying through the air all the time, but you don't know that there's a radio with a dial that can tune in and hear music, then you would be like, what's this weird stuff that's always going through the air, right?
Right.
It's just a transmitted music. And so that's a lot of the same. Now, what I do think, based on a lot of different things, and, remember, I may have mentioned this before, but Skinwalker Ranch was a place I tried to get to for 15 years. Ever since George Knapp and Com Kelleher's book came out on Skinwalker in 2005, I spent my entire career trying to get on that ranch, to pitch shows, to pitch projects, ideas, to get onto that ranch. And you just couldn't, for a lot of reasons: government involvement, private ownership. So I jumped at the opportunity when I was offered the chance to go and showrun and produce it. So I had a lot of ideas, thoughts, and beliefs and potential theories going into it. And then having gone, starting out on season 3 of the show, I was able to look at the previous 2 seasons of experiments and results to understand where they were at in the investigation and what they had uncovered. And then, of course, while I was there was when a lot of the disclosure happened, and we were getting information about what had taken place there before, because the government investigation at Skinwalker Ranch is what led to ATIP, the federal UAP program, the first one that we know about. So there was a lot.
Repeat all that, Mark. The investigation of Skinwalker Ranch.
So when Robert Bigelow owned the ranch, he first started with NIDS, National Institute for Discovery Sciences, which is when Robert Bigelow first owned the ranch, he formed NIDS, the National Institute for Discovery Sciences, where he had his own team out there investigating. During that time, towards the end of it, a physicist with the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, had asked Senator Harry Reid, who had previously been Bigelow's lawyer, a friend of him, about what was going on at the ranch, to see if he could get an invite to go check it out. That physicist went out to the ranch, and I think it was in the first 15 minutes, he saw something like an infinity sign kind of hovering behind someone's head, and went back to DIA and said, we got to investigate this place. And so that's how then they got the money from the Pentagon, and they started a research program there that was called OSAP. It was Advanced Weapon Systems Program. Oh my God, I don't know why I'm blanking on this, but OSAP was the government program that was studying at the ranch, and they were studying the ranch and also commissioning independent study of different things, wormholes, dimensional theory. They actually looked at the Tic Tac UFO video during that program years before anyone knew it happened or that it was out there. And the results of the investigation, the government investigation at Skinwalker Ranch, that report became the impetus for the formation of ATIP, the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program, which Lou Elizondo was working.
Right.
So the Skinwalker Ranch was literally the reason why the federal UAP program began.
Interesting. I wasn't aware of that. So interesting how much our government knows, or I don't know. It's interesting how much they're involved. And we had someone on the show previously who was former CIA and did a lot of remote viewing when that was sort of a stronger element. And he said that, definitely there's aliens at Lawrence Livermore. And nobody seems surprised. They're like, yeah. But there's definitely, did you feel that the government is obviously aware and, this is just part of the ongoing research?
Yeah. And there's some things that I can't talk about that, because of just some non-disclosures, but, particularly with Skinwalker Ranch, there's been a continued, it's not secret, but private interest in what was the investigation at the ranch, meaning we all, were
you were all privy to it.
Witness privy, support of some of it. And then so that there was a continued interest there. And then, while we were filming season 3, unbeknownst to anyone, Dr. Travis Taylor was working as the chief scientist for the federal UAP program. Jay Stratton, we didn't know. He had to keep it secret from us, but he had been working the entire time with them. So there's always been that interest. But getting back to your other question, I think this is where it gets interesting, especially with the government. What do I think was going on there? And, like ghost, the word ghost, kind of like, what does that mean? Alien is, again, sort of an archaic term for what or who is, let's say, a part of the world that we are living in some form or fashion. I always had a difficult time believing that, there's a couple of aliens, they, pack their sleeping bags in their canteens and they get in a ship and they go across the universe to come here. Not to say that doesn't happen, but I thought that that was probably a remedial understanding of the science and the play, right? It just didn't. One thing that I've always been keen on is understanding how wrong we'll always be because we're working with a limited understanding of things, right? So,
right.
If we think that, this is how beings are traveling through space, most likely it's very wrong just because we have no understanding of the physics involved in that level of sort of travel. So I think that a lot of what was going on at Skinwalker Ranch was more of a either dimensional or sort of parallel universe or multiverse interaction.
Right.
I think that it's one of these spaces where for brief moments, doors or windows open into other spaces, places, or time. And I think that the ranch has something there, whether it's naturally occurring or unnaturally occurring, that I think is allowing for the right set of technology and tools and understanding to access. I often say, look, we fire fire a rocket up into the anomaly, and then suddenly a UAP appears, in some other space, place, or time. There could be scientists who are looking at the same space that we are, whether, again, different realities or time, we're making it. And they see a bright light shoot up into the sky, so they send a drone out to try to check out what it is. And so they're seeing our rocket, we're seeing their drone. I think that's the reason I use that is because the one thing that was certain at Skinwalker Ranch was that you could elicit a response by doing certain things, especially shooting rockets into the anomaly. Something would happen. So the fact that there was always a reaction to the action, it became more than just correlatory. There was causality there. And so what a lot of it seemed to be to me, based on, just experience, but also knowing what I don't know, is I felt like when we, sort of poked at something else came out to check out what we were doing. Maybe it's like sort of threat assessment, reconnaissance, who knows? I think that it's also plays into why so many things go wrong at the ranch. And the idea has always been that there's some sentient intelligence or understanding of what's going on there, meaning the ranch knows what you're going to do before you do it. And then,
I see. There's a consciousness there. There's a living consciousness.
Yeah.
Whether it's a sentient being or beings.
Yeah, but that's not what I believe. What I believe is that there is very potentially, it's a technology. It's called a semi-AI technology that is programmed to receive input so that it can protect. And if we are all focusing so heavy on this rocket we're going to fire, maybe this thing, which is not programmed for our minds, but for some other quantum connection, is interpreting that as a command to neutralize a threat, stopping those things from happening because it believes that's its job. I say, look, who knows if way, way, way back when, who knows, how long ago, before people or whatever, the Earth was an intergalactic mining rock for gold, right? I mean, I use gold because where did the importance of gold suddenly come from, and how much it's used in space technology is insane, but like why it was always so important, cultures and whatnot. But let's say that was the situation and you think it's super advanced beings or whatever. So it's not going to happen like our mining operations, but there's potential similarities, meaning let's say it's an autonomous mining situation, right? And just like we have oil rigs that are autonomously, the jacks that are pump jacks that are going up and down, no one's watching them, but there's sensors, there's cameras and issues, there's detectors that can send issues to a central command to let you know there's something wrong with that. And you go and you check it out. Let's say this mining operation was autonomous and you had these spherical drone semi-autonomous system, that would monitor for potential issues that could affect the mining operation.
That makes sense.
Remember, one thing that we know about our planet is it's incredibly unstable.
Yes.
The Earth changes from weather to earthquakes, shifts, and over long periods of time, it's very unstable. It's not suited for very, very long-term sort of, building or habitation because of over a long period of time, so much is going to shift and change, from where the ice is and to where the tectonic plates are shifting. It's just unstable when you think about millennia, millions of years. So let's say that, these drone type things were out there to not only monitor equipment, fix it, or shut it down, right? Like the capability to, but also to detect environmental issues that could affect the operation in order to try to stop those or protect the machinery or relay that information back to home base. And if they're left behind, then they're still active. They're still by design would be looking for command, stimulus, information. But if it's not the way they were programmed for, it's coming in different forms, then it can, send mixed signals. I think that's like an interesting way of almost practically looking at it. But I also think that from a little bit more alien perspective, I think that there is something in the Mesa, very possibly almost interdimensional mining.
Right.
Like there is something going on inside that Mesa that is not in our, dimension, or it's in a parallel universe, something like that we can't see, but it's, it's being done. Maybe it's an important element that we don't know about, or who knows what, right? It could be but dangerous for us to get, sort of too close to it involved. And so a lot of, I think, of what tries to push us off of that is a safety mechanism. I mean, when you're at the ranch, for me, it became challenging to remember the seriousness and the dangers, and not, I got so giddy and excited about what was going on in the experiment and the results of what might happen. And towards the end of the season, when we were drilling into the Mesa and hit an object, and then, this sound got broadcast over the walkie-talkies. One of the participants, Tom Lewis, dropped to his knees. He was at Homestead 3, investigating there. We're waiting to see if anything happened. Dropped to his knees. His arm went numb. He got to get rushed to the hospital, and his heart was in arrhythmia. He had to wear
no.
And this was from what appeared to the doctors to be some electrical, shock or impulse that heart out of rhythm. Like, that's serious. We'd be out in the middle of a field and, radiation spikes would pop up. Travis got radiation burns on his hand. These are serious things that I think that, we're still a little bit like children trying to, like, go towards, the the fireworks while some, people who are doing the work are trying to kind of keep us away from it in a way. I think that's also something that's possible because
Huh.
as far as possibility goes, who the heck knows ultimately? But I think that I do think that you think about a pond or a lake with fish in it,
Mm-hmm.
in the ocean, right? This is an environment, a realm that those things living in the water mostly only know what's in the water and have
Sure.
no understanding or idea of the world outside the water that it even exists, right? That's so they're very much in a different dimension than us. Yet, if we want to, we can put our hand or a fishing line into the water and take out whatever we want.
Right.
We can also put on a suit and go into their world and survive and interact and live in it and even disguise ourselves so that they don't notice us in a way so that we're not disturbing them. I think about scuba diving all the time. Like I learned to scuba dive on the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, and what became amazing was when you get to the point where you're invisible because you're so calm, you're steady, you blend into the environment, you're not creating anything, to fish and animals that don't have a historical knowledge of what we are and look at us, they may just not even notice that we're there. They may not see us as what we are because it's not in their their vocabulary, their mental vocabulary of what exists down here. They're looking for things like predator, prey,
Right.
whatever. And so when you get to a point in scuba diving where you're so calm and still and you're just in the flow of the environment, all the sea life comes out.
Right.
They're all doing their thing and they're moving around you, and some may notice you, they may be curious, but they go on about their business. But now here I am, not only observing their environment, nearly invisible, in a suit that allows me to live in their environment. But if I wanted to, I have the ability to affect their environment. Aliens, interdimensional beings, multiverse travelers, whatever you want to call them. I just think a lot of what we're seeing, if there are these entities involved in it, it's a lot the same way. And it's not, I don't believe it's from this position of, we don't want them to know we're here because it'll upset the Galactic Federation. I just think that we're not capable because of, of the way in which we experience our world is designed for our world.
Right.
We, I saw this thing recently, really interesting about why we dream. And there's a lot, again, I never subscribe to the belief that there's one answer or one reason for everything. But one of the things is the belief as to why we dream was that, during our evolution, our senses were all sort of battling each other for dominance, right? Is it going to be touch? Is it going to be smell? Is it going to be hearing? What's going to evolve as the dominant sense for survival? And the brain realized that when the body goes to sleep for 8 or however many hours a day, the eyes aren't operating. And so we run the risk of the other senses over time becoming the dominant ones. So the brain created dreams to keep the importance of visual sense present so that our vision would not, and our brain, right, would prioritize what we see over what we hear, smell, touch, feel.
Interesting.
Right?
That's interesting.
But why would that be the case? We know that's not the case for other animals on the planet.
Right. That's true.
Why would it be the case for other living things off the planet or in other dimensions or environments? So again, if you are, interdimensional, let's say, but the way in which you exist because of your evolution and your environment is so unfamiliar to us that we literally can't see you.
Right.
It's not a question of someone trying to stay hidden. It's just we're not in the same.
We don't have that capacity.
Yeah, it's not. Again, could you explain to a fish that you're a human? Now you could go, well, consciousness and, an abstract thought and all that kind of stuff. Sure, fine. But, again, that's a limited understanding. That's just understanding of our brains, our evolution, where we are in our cycle and the way in which we, survive due to our environment. Like time, time may not exist other places because it's not or it may not
It's not relevant
it
even.
may not be relevant because it's like we need to understand time because it's a major part of our linear existence, plain and simple. But for something that lives not linearly, why would time even be a thing for them to deal with? I also look at popular culture, media, and news. And at the time at Skinwalker Ranch, so I was there, and even now. I mean, think about how quickly Marvel and superhero movies came on the scene with the multiverse. The idea of
Immediate. Right. Exactly.
how prevalent it was.
Even in science, that became very, very quick to say
the quantum
we are a right.
And quantum entanglement and now computing. So, if I'm at all trying to influence whether, and this is why I always say, like, you look sort of at like something like the Ariel school phenomena from Zimbabwe, the 90s, where 60 school children saw these UFOs and aliens come out and gave them visions of like the future and destruction of the planet. I would say the reason why I put value on that story and want to investigate it is because, look, if I'm thinking about how to impact the future in a certain way, I wouldn't go to adults. I would go to children at an age where they're forming their worldview and their place of the world psychologically with an experience that may direct them into fields and work that would go towards a certain goal, right?
Exactly.
So the same thing happens here. You look at the Cold War and the space race. The space race inspired an entire generation of engineers, kids who like saw rockets going into the sky and like, I want to do that. And then they became engineers and worked in science and we got advancements in propulsion. And I don't say that, there's some cabal who's saying we should do this, we should do that. But that's outside of the point. But I look and say, well, intended or unintended, right now, you've got children, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old who now for a few years at least understand the idea of a multiverse and quantum physics.
That's true.
So who knows how that's going to affect literally the wiring of their brain and the way in which they're able to look at and dissect and solve problems in the future, let alone the fields they'll go into. Because it's very possible that if we need to have these breakthroughs in quantum mechanics and physics to understand the world outside our observable universe, you need people who their brains are developed to think in a different way.
Exactly. This is very true. Explains
a
lot about the kids that are being born now too.
Skinwalker Ranch, at the time I was reading about multiple intersecting world theory, so I just think that Skinwalker Ranch, like other places, is a place where for brief or semi-consistent, periods of time, doors or windows open, spaces, places, or times.
Right. It's a portal.
Depending on how you can you open it yourself? Are you waiting for it to open from natural phenomena? Is there something there opening or closing it? Is it sending, is it just quantum tunneling for communication from what's in the ground to what's, outside or elsewhere? I don't know. But I think when you look at over time, things like the alien stories from the beginning there and other places and how those shift, I wonder if that has more to do with positioning, right? Are we, as our solar system moves through the galaxy, is our positioning changing to?
Oh, that makes sense. It's not like we're being invaded. It's actually we're moving, we're shifting into a different dimension ourselves as Earth so that the windows may open, the doors may open.
Right. So like, let's say, for 10 years, we are closest, in the quantum tunnel to Zeta Reticuli. So we're getting those aliens. But then the next decade, we're further away, but we're closer to this other, place. Again, whether it's physical location or dimension or parallel,
right?
Whatever. So maybe, because we're so fluid, the connections we have between other spaces, places, or times changes as our position
makes complete sense, actually.
It could. Who knows, right? Who knows? It could be so far from the truth and reality because, it doesn't mean just because there's unknown objects in the sky that they're also not man-made.
So, that being said, let's jump to what happened in New Jersey earlier this year when there were multiple drones in the sky over New Jersey. Did you have any thoughts or opinions about all of that?
Yeah, it was really curious because of the visibility,
Mm-hmm.
the number, the movement. It looked very much to me like a testing program, which I think was one of the explanations that came out. Either maybe it was a rapid response. Maybe something did happen. Maybe there was something off the coast, or somebody launched something, or something came into our space, and it was a response. Right? We know that in the world of spycraft, we're always doing it, and our enemies are always doing it to us, where we're sending stuff into each other's airspace.
Mm-hmm.
Got people taking video of a plant. We know we send drones into other countries not supposed to. We know they send drones into our countries. So sometimes maybe it's a little bit of people, got these leaders puffing their chest out, where it's like, hey, you came into my country, that wasn't cool. I'm going to show you that I could also come into your country. But just so you know, you're not protected like you think you are. Let's kind of response to that. Maybe it's getting prepared for that sort of thing. And a lot of it looked like mapping. Looked like, the patterns of.
You mean the coordinates?
Flying. Yeah, it looked like they were creating low altitude, just off the surface. It's like creating routes.
Right. So there'd be positioning, whether it's.
Maybe it's for autonomous drone movement or flight movement. You have to maybe survey. It's like, look, before you could have self-driving cars, you had to have Tesla put cameras on every car and GPS on every car to map every road.
This is true.
So that then they could feed that data into the autonomous cars.
Right.
So perhaps it's something like that. What I did find interesting was that it coincided with, Google's launching of Willow, their quantum computer, which, the belief was that in order to solve the problem that it solved the way it did and so quickly, it had to access information outside of our known universe. And so interact with other versions of itself elsewhere.
Oh, I
right?
see.
To get the information so quickly. Basically quantum, right? I mean, this is quantum, quantum physics is. It exists in multiple places and states at the same time. And we don't see the connection between them. So that happens outside of our observable universe. Because our physics is what we use to understand our observable universe, known universe. Quantum science tends to, I know it's not as much as it used to be, like unknown, but the theory was, this is what happens outside of what we can observe, therefore happens outside of our quote unquote observable universe.
Right.
So it's like, well, if Willow went somewhere to get information, it came back with the information. We don't know where it went and how it got there and what it was like over there. We just saw the result of it accessing, because we can't see it. We don't have the tools to see how it's going and where it's going. So that was the idea. And so this goes back to something like hitchhiker theory or attachment with, paranormal and even Skinwalker Ranch. I believe that a lot of times what we get with that is a quantum entanglement, right? Mm-hmm. There's that connection. Our consciousness is a quantum computer in a way, and that connection is made. And then, it's not something you can break. How? So I think that, there is some level of this quantum entanglement taking place. So if Willow on Spin Up connected to some other, parallel universe or multiverse or dimension, well, now it's created a tunnel, a two-way tunnel. So now that it exists, theoretically, you would think whatever it accessed can also access it, which means now something can come into our space. So who's to say when they opened that door and exposed, a doorway to dimensions or universes, something didn't come through to see what's going on that sparked the need for the response drones.
It's an interesting concept. Do you feel like there seems to be like there's an uptick, at least in the sightings of UAPs and activity? Do you feel like that's accurate, or is it always there and we're just now we're just seeing more of it? I don't know. Are there more portals open? Are we just more aware? Or is this not real?
It's hard to say. I've really tried. I've used a lot of AI to try to get the data to understand, is there more activity, or, are we looking for it more?
Right.
Or do we have better technology or prevalent technology that allows us to share it more? I mean, once the smartphone had great video and photo cameras, a lot more evidence. Is that because there's more activity, or is it because we have the devices, better devices? When you look at what the government's capturing, even with the Tic Tac, it wasn't until the technology was developed to see and capture and chase those things could they get those things on camera, film. I think that the most likely scenario is, as our technology advances, we will be able to see more of what we couldn't see before, either because it moves fast or, just the way in which imaging works, technology works. And I believe will interfere more. The sphere that fell in like Colombia recently, that's a big news. I don't know if it's legit yet, but I would not be surprised if in the coming years, as technologies get continually more advanced, we begin to see more things fall out of the sky.
Interesting.
Or we can.
Why do you feel that? Why do you feel that way? That we'll see more unidentified things fall out of the sky?
Yeah. Because as our technology improves and we get closer to a technology that's advanced, there's going to be more room for interaction.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Which causes
errors
and failures and things, right? I mean, look, anybody could have a radio station in their backyard now that can broadcast over the airwaves.
Sure.
You're not allowed to, right? But it's not a technology that's only a few have access to. You can do it. So I think that, especially when it comes to communication, as we develop more and more global communication, frequencies that we're using, transmission, using quantum tunneling for transmission and communication, I think that those will begin to expose or interfere with what may be around that was unseen before.
Interesting. Wow. Exciting times, actually. So let's talk about you for a second. So you've done so much work in nonfiction. My sense is you're moving into more of the episodic, more of the not fictional, so to speak, but perhaps more theatrical sort of work that may enable you to be more creative with some of the data you already have so far. Is that kind of a good intuition?
Yeah. I never intended to go into the doc series unscripted, reality world. I was always a sci-fi nut and just heavily interested in, these types of stories. The opportunity to go explore the reality, the real version of them, has armed me with even more ideas than I ever had and more ability to construct and present them. I think right now, again, because of everything that's going on in the interest, is more than ever a better time, both creatively, from a storyteller perspective, being able to share and tell stories that people find interesting, engaging, exciting, but also technology, whether it's AI or being able YouTube or even more short form content, the ability that we have to tell stories in the way in which we tell them and the barriers to telling them is dropping every day and getting lower. So, whether it's traditionally writing a pilot or a screenplay or trying to take a script and go get it made, do a feature, or using just my own tools to put something out that's, shorter or smaller. I'll never leave exploring the real world that of the unexplained. I'll never leave that, but I feel like it's really time for me to give more to people, as far as not just following what's going on out there and almost reporting on it, presenting it, but now let me tell some stories in a different way that I'm uniquely qualified to tell, but also that provides another value
to
others.
it's more expansive and creative. And I would assume somewhat that in your work, both as a producer and then sort of as an investigator, there's some things that are just hard to explain, but creatively speaking, you can share that, you can show that. And probably the emotional experience that characters have within the context of these stories is also something that people would probably really relate to and be curious about.
I think that's probably the biggest advantage to this scripted world, whether it's features or TV, is that, first of all, I don't have to have the answers. I can just present what ifs in a way that be, believable or fun, but don't have to be like true as far as we know these to be fact. But also, it's very difficult in unscripted to really show character development.
Exactly.
And at the end of the day, we're human beings, and we experience, we learn, we care, we connect through, an emotional,
yes,
in an emotional way, somewhat, right? Meaning, we understand ourselves best when we can look at someone else and understand them.
Right.
And writing good characters, allows for that. And that's what I find, the most exciting thing of anything I do is creating those character arcs and those stories, understanding who the character is and what they have to achieve and why they won't get there at first, and what, thematically and aesthetically and visually how does that story connect in the writing. I mean, just when you write, before, obviously when you make videos or films or movies or TV shows, it's the same. But when you write, just writing alone, it's something that you don't need anyone's permission to do.
Right.
And you create a world. You can create a world that maybe it exists in a way, maybe it never did, maybe it's not, it never will, but you can take so much of your experiences in life, both practically, literally, figuratively, emotionally, psychologically, connectedly, and use those to share something with the world and audience that creates an effect on them that, whether it's positive or negative, reminds them of what it means to be a human being. Right. And that's what's important to me, is that we, what's special about being a human being.
Exactly.
Is the way in which we can connect with others in our surroundings, and even outside of that. That's truly human. There are other animals that do certain versions of it, but the way in which people can connect to each other, people they don't know. But my biggest goal is always, when you read something I write or watch something I make, does it elicit an emotional reaction?
Exactly.
I know I can get you to think. I know I can get you to think about ideas and be engaged and be excited about it. But can I get you to feel? Because that's who I am. That's what, my superpower, my gift is my ability to feel. And what do I have it for, if not to share in a way that other people can get value from feeling something from what I create? It's not the only value in the world, but if it's the one that I can deliver and provide, it's purpose.
I would imagine there's some really unique experiences you've had through your career that, if they can be shared in a different way on a different kind of screen, or on the screen in a different way, it would be an even more immense experience for the audience. So what has been the story that you've never been able to tell that you'd like to tell?
I can't tell it. Maybe I will soon. We were talking offline about this. Maybe I will be able to soon share something that really sets the tone for each structure, experience. Obviously spending so much time on Skinwalker Ranch was amazing. I had written a book, 60 Days on Skinwalker Ranch, about my experiences, which, I hope to be able to release. But within that is the premise of a story, which becomes a storyline, which is an arc of my time there that I really hope I get to share.
Ooh. Well, now you're going to leave us hanging. That's great. That's a great cliffhanger. So I hope that happens, because now I want to know. I want to see that.
Well, I'll let you know. I'll let you know as soon as I know.
Sounds fabulous. So is there any way you're going to be speaking soon? Anything like that? Anything upcoming publicly for you? I know you were doing, you're appearing here and there to be on some panels. Just curious.
Yeah, not right now. I've taken a step back just to focus on a few things, but I would think by sometime in mid to the end of the summer, I'll be back out there as far as YouTube, podcasts, social media, potentially speaking, and then just sharing content and being more forward facing to anybody who's interested.
Cool. I bet people look forward to it. I know you also mentioned you spent a little time out in the desert looking for UAPs. So I'm curious to hear about all of that at some point.
Next time we can have that conversation.
Yeah, I'd love to. I bet some other people would like to join you on that adventure. So anyway, well, thank you so much.
Maybe I'll just run, say, okay, anybody whoever wants to, let's we'll jump in the car, we'll go camp out in the desert for a week and try to spot some UFOs. Yeah,
I think you'd have hundreds of people. Look out, Mark. Sounds like a good time. All right. Thank you so much. Is there anything else? Is there anything I missed? No. Anything you want to mention that's coming up?
Thank you so much, Diana. I really appreciate it. Like I said, people can always, if they want, they're interested, they can check me out. My company is Strange Story, the Strange Story Company. On all social media, it's at Strange Story Co. But you can also always Google my name or Mr. Paranormal or UFO Pro, and I'll generally show up anywhere. But I love to hear from people. I love it when people reach out and want to talk or share or have something interesting. So please, if anybody loves to reach out to me, just drop Strange Story Co. into Google and anywhere you're comfortable reaching out, send me a message.
Sounds great. I'll list all of that in the description below as well. And I really appreciate your time and your brain and your thoughts on all of this and making us think in a different way at a time that seems confusing.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Thanks.
It's a pleasure. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Soul Fam podcast. Be sure to tune in to every episode where we dive into a different rabbit hole of the known and unknown to empower you in conscious living and exploration of the greater universe. We hope you leave each episode with a little stardust in your hair and inspiration in your heart. With love from your Soul Fam.